We're going to be continuing the chat about EPCs, but we're going to put the focus towards Scotland.
A different type of EPC, different style of EPC, which is based on now the heat retention rating, or HRR. Landlords will need to meet a new standard, which is based on the HRR, and it needs to be band C by 2028 for new tenancies and 2033 for existing tenancies. It's more about the fabric of the building. We've got a new rating based on the heat retention of the building, and definitely a big focus on clean energy. So heat pumps and really phasing out gas boilers.
So what's the predominant type of housing stock, especially from a rental perspective?
In Scotland, predominantly the housing stock within city centres is tenement flats. The tenements are going to be the biggest issue. These things were built 150 years ago. Trying to apply modern standards to a building like this, it's going to be really difficult.
So do you think, Nick, that people should start panicking now? Don't know where this is going.
I think there's a massive opportunity for a number of reasons. Every month on the second Saturday, we run an online networking session where you can meet other active investors face to face. And 3 times a year, we bring everyone together at live in-person events. Spaces are always limited, so if you want to be part of it, check out thispropertylife.co.uk/events and secure your spot today.
Hello, and on this episode of This Property Life, we're going to be continuing the chat about EPCs, but we're going to put the focus towards Scotland. So last time Nick and I spoke, it was about England and Wales and the potential changes that are happening to the EPC standards there. But we are talking about all things Scotland because the market is different up there. They've got different rules. So let's just get straight into it. What's going on in Scotland and why do you have to be so different?
I don't know why they have to be different, but they always do have to be a little bit different. It's like they have to just be like better or go a bit more extreme than England does. If England does something, it's like, yeah, we're going to do that, but we're going to raise it. And we're going to just go a little bit more extreme on it. It's a bit of a Scottish theme, maybe. I don't know. Scottish listeners, tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. So, yeah, it is a bit different up here. It's a bit more stringent what's coming, but there are, I think, still really good opportunities if you know what you're doing.
Let's start from where we're currently at. So in England and Wales, we have to have a minimum energy efficiency standard of an E to be able to rent out a property. So the EPC has to be standard E. What are you guys at?
There isn't a legally binding minimum EPC yet, but it's obviously coming.
Okay. So you have the same standards though. You have EPCs up there?
Yeah, absolutely. I have EPCs, but it's, as I said, it's not a requirement legally yet to be able to rent out a property. It has to be a certain level.
Okay. So what's the legislation that's coming in and when do we think it's going to happen?
Other things that's still the same at the moment is 10 years as it stands at the moment. Each EPC does last for 10 years. Ratings are given on a scale of 1 to 100. Yeah, where 100 is the most efficient and cheapest to run. And it's shown on like a band of A to G. Yep. And so that's kind of where we are. But what is coming, and I'm going to have to refer to note here because it is quite complicated as to what is coming in. So Scotland are kind of replacing, and I'm going to mainly talk about the private rental sector, the PRS, up here. So that's what's relevant to us. They're bringing in a different type of EPC, different style of EPC, which is based on now the heat retention rating, or HRR. So what does that mean? Landlords will need to meet a new standard, which is based on the HRR, and it needs to be band C by 2028 for new tenancies and 2033 for existing tenancies. So we have got a bit more time in Scotland as it stands right now.
Yeah.
So
And
there's a bit more of a clear roadmap in Scotland, I think, as to what's going on.
9 years or 8 years.
So yes, we've got a new rating based on the heat retention of the building and definitely a big focus on clean energy. That's where it's going. So it's the cleanliness of the energy and the heat retention.
Okay, let's focus on the cleanliness first. So presumably what they are labeling clean energy is heat pumps.
Heat pumps and really phasing out gas boilers. So for example, I mean, I know this is commercial. I think I did reference it last time, but when we did our Stafford Street building, which is commercial, but we weren't allowed to put in gas boilers. We had to put in electric boilers, which are rubbish, but we had to put them in.
Yeah. Not only are they rubbish at the moment, but they're also really expensive to run.
Really expensive. Yeah. Our electricity bill is off the scale.
Yeah.
So yeah, so heating systems are now going to be rated explicitly for emissions and running cost. So it does mean that having a more compliant heating system really matters a lot more in Scotland, or
Okay,
will
so
matter a lot more in
heat
Scotland.
pumps is the thing that they're trying to push. They're doing grants to push that a lot. I know that the figures for take up of that grant is really, really small and not as the government expected. A very good friend of ours is a heat pump specialist, and whilst he's busy with heat pumps, he said that without doubt the take up has not been as the government expected. And I think a lot of that is even with the grant, it's still really expensive because you have to actually upgrade every single radiator in your property because the flow of water is different and they have to be a lot bigger and it just costs an fortune to do.
I think we talked about this last time, the law of unintended consequences. I think it's, the more extreme you go, the more unintended consequences there are. And, I think, as we said last time, they're coming from a good place, I think, but they really just have not thought this through at all and the cost implications of doing this. Now, I do think in Scotland, which we'll get onto, I think, as we go through this episode, we'll talk a bit about the different types of housing stock up here and why that, I think, actually is a benefit to landlords. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Is there much chat of hydrogen as a heat source up there?
I haven't heard anything about hydrogen as it is. It's more about heat pumps and electric and replacing gas.
Okay, so new builds up there presumably ain't allowed to use gas central heating.
I don't know for 100%. I know that we definitely weren't allowed to put gas central
Yeah.
heating in. In one of the buildings, the second building, it wasn't a thing. So, and I think that probably changed as the government up here changed and the Green Party were no longer part of it. So when we did Stafford Street, the Green Party were involved, and that was a big subject matter. The second one we did wasn't a thing. We have got gas in there. Crazy, eh? That's commercial. It is commercial though. It does really highlight the inconsistency that we have to deal with. But this is coming for sure. We've got a bit more advanced notes. As I said, the two key dates are 2028 and 2033 for full rollout for investors. So we do have a little bit more time, to get things in place.
Okay, so we understand what the clean energy aspect is. Let's talk about the heat retention. So presumably this is about the actual fabric of the building, what it's made of.
Yeah. And so it's going to be what type of build is it? What type of property is it? And, cavity walls and things like that are going to be a key part here as to the heat retention and the obviously, lofts and insulation are going to be key points here. The actual biggest difference and the thing that is actually probably for most people most concerning is that in England and Wales, as we discussed, if you can lock in now, you get 10 years. In Scotland, they're reducing that to 5. You have to renew your certificate every 5 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
great for the EPC assessors.
Great for EPC assessors if anyone's looking to retrain in anything or have a little side hustle. There you go. But yeah, it is. It's going to be every 5 years. That's a proposal. So, I mean, to be fair, once you've done everything, what should change within 5 years? Probably not a lot, but it does still mean that you will get assessed every 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so from 10 years to 5 years, what about the fabric of the building? So you guys up in Scotland, well, you have different types of housing stock, don't you, to England and Wales? And obviously they're different to each other as well. So what's the predominant type of housing stock, especially from a rental perspective?
Well, yeah, this I'm going to focus just on really what landlords tend to own. So in England and Wales, I'm going to say that probably the majority of landlords are going to own Victorian housing stock, Victorian terraced houses, maybe semi-detached houses. I think for professional landlords, definitely probably in that kind of environment. More amateur landlords might have new build flats or bigger houses they rent out. In Scotland, a lot of predominantly the housing stock within city centres is tenement flats. So stone built, sandstone tenement buildings that were built in the same kind of era that the Victorians built, all the terraces in England and Wales, they were building big tenements. So you've got that. A lot of that housing stock is city centres, particularly prevalent in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and I guess Dundee for those that invest there as well. But then you've got a whole load of housing that was built in the 70s, 60s, 70s, a lot of council built properties. They're obviously a lot newer than the tenements. So a lot of the old kind of tenants were cleared out and new housing stock was built in the 70s. They had a lot of new towns like places like Cumbernauld and new towns across the central belt were built with this kind of housing style. Now, this is better because it was built in the 70s, generally built with cavity walls. And so these are the kind of properties that are going to be easier to upgrade. The tenements are going to be the biggest issue. It's that kind of housing stock. So I've got a graphic here which I can show. So that's the kind of tenement housing stock that you'll see all over Scotland. 1, 2-bed flats, 3-bed flats in an old building like that. Okay, so you can see straight away that from an heat efficiency point of view, these things were built 150 years ago. So trying to apply modern standards to a building like this, it's going to be really difficult. A lot of these are quite, they're drafty, as I said, stone built. You're going to have issues with windows. You're going to have issues with the roofs. You're going to have issues with the walls. So this is, I think, if you own a lot of this stock, I think you really need to think now about what you can do.
So would you be not buying this stock from now on?
I wouldn't anyway, to be honest with you. So anybody, that I work with on a, consultancy base or whatever, as a mentor, I would always advise against this kind of housing stock. Okay, for a number of reasons. One of them is they are old and drafty and not particularly comfortable. And for the type of tenants that we want to attract for long-term renters, it's probably not the most attractive kind of housing stock. So for a
Yeah.
number of reasons, I don't own a lot of this. I know people that do, but I don't. I've got 1 or 2, but not. It's definitely not forms the bulk of the portfolio for sure. The other type of houses that I was talking about was more this. So this was housing stock that's built kind of 60s, 70s onwards. These are, in terms of rental stock, these are great. Great renters. You see this kind of houses all over the central belt of Scotland, terraced houses built in that era. At that time, a lot more modern materials than the tenements were built with. So they've already got more heat retention capability than those old tenement blocks.
Yeah, and I know when I've certainly been on buying trips up in Scotland with clients that this sort of terraced house with the grey, is that like some sort of grey pebble dash thing going on mostly, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone invests up here, you've seen this. This exactly kind of thing. You can, pick up this kind of housing stock depending where you're looking from 50, 60K, upwards.
Yeah.
So great for renting, and definitely when it comes to EPCs, much, much easier and cheaper to upgrade a house like this than a tenement flat.
Okay, so basically for our Scottish listeners and viewers, get yourself out to the Central Belt and Ayrshire and all those sort of places. Pick up some of these cottage flats or terraced housing that were built around the 70s.
I think a lot of people kind of, who maybe haven't worked with a mentor or haven't done a huge amount of research on it, or maybe the more amateur style of investor probably would gravitate towards a city centre flat, thinking that's a great renter. From a professional level, really isn't. We want families, they generally want houses, and that leads us to that kind of housing stock. But definitely from an EPC perspective, there are going to be grants. There are like Home Energy Scotland going to offer grants. There are grants that you will be able to get. Spend cap is going to be similar, I think, to England. It's going to, at the moment, it looks like it's going to be about 10,000.
Yeah, I think ours is 15,000, but yeah.
So there will be exemptions potentially if, you've spent up to 10,000. But, in my opinion, if you've got more of the ex-local authority housing stock, if you can get some grants, for heat pumps and upgrading your heating system, which we're being told you will be able to get, your net costs for upgrading your house might only be 3 grand. Particularly if you've got PVC windows already, you've got cavity walls, you've got insulation in the loft, you might not need a huge amount of upgrading if you can get a grant for the heating system. If you've got a tenement flat, you've got problems because, as I said, these were built before cavity walls were a thing. So, the cost of insulating a tenement flat, I think, is going to be high. And I don't think the government's thought this through, because how is everyone going to afford this?
And I think one thing that I've learned about the Scottish system is that this new EPC grading that will be coming in, not only is it only valid for 5 years, but it is going to be relevant for normal homeowners. So if they're selling their property, it has to be at a certain EPC level.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be homeowners is definitely going to be, it's going to be implemented by 2033 for homeowners as well. So it
Yeah.
is a homeowner thing. I've just concentrated mainly on the.
That's gonna affect our flippers and house traders as well, isn't it? Because again, demand, you would those beautiful tenement buildings in Edinburgh, I think are quite desirable. People love to live in those in the city centre. But if you're flipping those on and you have to have a certain EPC level, it's going to hit your bottom line.
Well, yeah, and a lot of those tenements in Edinburgh, particularly listed. Anywhere in the new town is listed. It's all B listed, and it's either B listed or A listed. All right. So when you've got a listed building as well, then you got clashes with, historic Scotland. What you can and can't do. They're not going to want you hacking into walls and putting insulation in or whatever. So you're going to have a bit of a clash here, and I don't know how that's going to play out because, we had issues. Both of our hotels are listed building, B listed, and planning and building control want you to do one thing, and historic Scotland don't want you to do anything. So, I don't really know how it's going to play out, and it's certainly not going to be covered. If you think about a new town flat in Edinburgh, 2-bed flat in the new town is upwards of £500,000. 10 grand isn't going to go very far.
So do you think, Nick, that people should start panicking now, bearing in mind we are looking at 2028 and 2033, and if there is a change of national government, I don't know where this is going.
I don't know. I mean, my gut feeling is this is coming. I can't see it. I mean, even if there is a fundamental change of government, bearing in mind in Scotland, that's much less likely than in England and Wales. So I think this is here.
Okay, so the smart money is on, the change is happening. It's going to happen quicker than England and Wales. And the smart money is on basically buying those 60s to 70s housing stock.
I think there's a massive opportunity for that, right? So I think the opportunity for investors that still wanting to get in, and I really do think that, and it's certainly something that I'm going to be doing, is getting back into the buy-to-let market for sure, because I think there's going to be huge opportunities. I think there's so many landlords and investors are going to be spooked and they're going to sell. In fact, I spoke to someone that I've known for a long time who's owned properties in Dumfriesshire for a long time, and he's told me a while ago he's selling everything just out to get out, right? So, so that is a large portfolio,
Yeah.
and people are getting out because I think a lot of that stock is older tenement stock.
Sometimes it's the final straw, isn't it, that breaks the back, as it were.
Yeah, look, I think it's all about what cash flow you're making for your properties. I think if you've got tenement flats that are barely scraping by, maybe you haven't bought correctly or you overspent, you went for the kind of glamour, tenement over the kind of more, I don't know, for want of a better word, boring terraced council house, then yeah, I'd be really looking at it and going, is it worth it? Is it worth hanging on to this? Why am I hanging on to this? If you've got a flat in the new town, Edinburgh, probably different because it's more of a capital play, probably. But if you've got, a lower value flat in a tenement block, I'd seriously be looking at this and thinking, do I want to exit now and reinvest into ex-local authority housing? If I'm buying in Scotland, and I will be, it's going to be ex-local authority, 70s built plus council stock, terraced houses and 400 block flats. Those work all day long, great renters. And I think the rents on those, which are already up significantly over the last few years, we're just going to go higher because there's not enough stock.
Yeah. Feels like we say the same thing every time. These unintended consequences of manipulation of the market really only hits one thing in a very negative way, and that is supply, which never keeps up with demand, which essentially in a free market always means rent rises.
It's basic economics. And
Yeah.
the governments just don't either ignore it or don't accept that that's the reality or think they can manipulate it, and hasn't worked yet.
So before we finish, one last question for you. Do you know whether social housing in Scotland is going to be given the same targets and going to be, measured in the same way, and they'll have to come up to standard?
When you say social, as in
Housing association,
housing
government owned.
association, I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that, but I can investigate and I can update
Yeah, let's find that
another
out,
time
because it
because
does pee me off when we're given a set of rules and then the government and social housing doesn't abide by the same set of rules. And
yeah, at
unless,
the moment it's just relating to the private rental sector. So yeah, good
well, let's
question.
find out the answer to that one, and we'll come back to it and we'll have a little rant about
Oh, good.
different stuff.
I like a rant.
Yes, it's therapeutic for us, isn't it? All right, thanks, Nick, for today. So it cleared up a few little differences between the English and Welsh market and the Scottish market. And you heard it here first. If you're investing in Scotland, keep buying, but be buying the 60s and 70s builds.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way ahead. Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Nick, and we'll speak soon.
See you soon.